We are finishing up our series this morning on crossing the divide. We started a couple weeks ago specifically looking at this political season when there's so much division, and we said that, you know, the church has a really unique role to play, I think, in division, rather than contributing to the division, which sometimes is what Christians can do, but instead, when we have the gospel, which speaks a better word and has something to say that is really relevant to it. And then last week we kind of expanded it from just politics to say what's kind of the motivation for Christians for actually addressing reconciliation and forgiveness and all these things that are hard to do. And we looked at that fact that we're all going to stand before Christ someday, and the fact that the judgment seat is also the mercy seat, and we're gonna stand there in front of a judge who took all that judgment on himself for us, and so how will we have responded to that love and mercy? And so we looked at that, and then thinking about this whole topic of division, realized also there's another kind of division that we haven't addressed yet, and that's division on the inside for us, which is what brought me to Bill, because if anybody is divided inside, it's Bill.
Yes.
No. Actually, no. Bill's talk helped me a lot with just my own sense of being disconnected inside. So we're going to talk to you in just a second. I'm almost done. Yeah, I have to have a little.
I feel like I'm on Mission Impossible.
Yeah, no, because somebody told me that we went almost 50 minutes last time, so I'm trying to watch our time this time. So I have a little stopwatch going up here so in case any of you were worried, yes. Who cares? Okay. All right, yes. Well, there will be no alarm going off. This is just for my own reference, so I can keep tabs on us here a little bit. You know what? I'll just turn it off. I'm just going to turn it off right now. All right? This is on you, though. I'm just saying, careful what you wish for. So, Bev, we're holding you responsible for this. So, but before we let you cook here this morning, I wanted to share a scripture passage with you that I think is a good lead off for wherever we're going here this morning. So this is out of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is talking, and he says this. He says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." And this is, we talked a little bit about last week, not seeing people through the world's point of view anymore, because we had that graphic up there where it was like, when you judge and you separate yourself from people, that's really what judging is doing. You're separating yourself from the other people, putting them in categories or buckets, and we're saying, Jesus is saying, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye or sister's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. This is echoed in the words of the social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, who just studies people all the time. And he said, in my 35 years of studying moral psychology, I've come to see this as one of humanity's greatest problems. We are too quick to anger and too slow to forgive. We are also, there's this word again, hypocrites, who judge others harshly while automatically justifying our own bad behavior. So that's just what we tend to do. And that word for hypocrite back in Jesus' day was the word that was used for stage actors. And I used this graphic a few months ago, basically how, we have this outer image that we are presenting to the world, and then behind it there's who we really are. That's often different from what's on the outside. And I started thinking, well, that right there, to be hypocrite, which means to have a mask on, or this pretend thing that we've got out here that's different from another part of us, that's a division in and of itself, right? We are becoming divided people when we act in that way. And so what Jesus is saying is, when that's going on, when we've got something that's unaddressed in your own life, that's going to spill over into your judgment of other people. And so what I realized is that the division between me and you, that dynamic that we've been talking about the last couple weeks, it just might be linked to a division that exists inside of me that's unaddressed. And sometimes when we think about the word hypocrite, it sounds so harsh and critical of Jesus, and I've pretty much only heard the criticism or chastisement from him in that as he's saying that. But I think actually there is real kindness in what he's saying too, because he's saying, take the time to deal with that big painful thing that you're ignoring in your own life before you're dealing with the person who's bothering you, because maybe you're seeing them through the lens of your own pain, and that's impacting that relationship. So I would say, be kind to your inner hypocrite. Deal with that painful plank that's going on. And that's really what we're talking a little bit about this morning, I think. That we need to address some of these things going on inside us, the disconnect inside us to connect with other people. Steve Cuss said, as a person of faith, your well-being, your connection to yourself is a gift you can give to people in your spheres. They will be grateful, and it will help them be well too. So this brings me to Bill. And so this last week we got together, and honestly, talking about personal, being connected with yourself, this is so Bill's wheelhouse that as soon as I started looking at this passage, I was like, oh, I have to bring Bill into this. And so we got together and we were talking, and I'm just jotting down all these notes of what he's saying, and at one point, it was so good. And at one point, I set my pen down, and he's making this really great point. And my pen, it was one of these little New Day springy pens. It literally exploded on the page. It was like he was blowing my pen's mind just as he was talking. And so here's what I thought we could do this morning, because I'm about done talking. I'm going to hand it off to you, but we're going to play. Yeah, just turn it off. So we're going to play a little game this morning that, as Tom mentioned, it's called Chill with Bill. So I have 5 cards here, say Chill with Bill on them. And Bill, you're going to, each one of these, I wrote down 5 quotes from Bill when we were talking this last week. So I've got 5 cards here and 5 quotes. And Bill, you can just point to any random card, and I'm going to read your quote back to you that you said, and then have you just tell us a little more what you were thinking about that, okay?
Okay.
So what would you like me to pick? A card, any card. All right. All right. Pretty notes. First one on here. Says, connection is how to be present when there's pain around. Disconnection is always a reaction for safety.
That's good.
You did. It was pretty good. What does that mean?
I feel like it might be easier. I wanted to read something out of Henri Nouwen's book, The Inner Voice of Love. It's called A Journey from Anguish to Freedom. he was talking about, when I first came up here, he's like, that book is well worn. But I've had this for 25 years. And I was reading this morning before we came in, so if you don't indulge me, like, just read it. It's called Go Into the Place of Your Pain. Yeah, I need readers. Okay. You have to live through your pain gradually, and thus deprive it of its power over you. Yes, you must go into the place of your pain, but only when you have gained some new ground. When you enter your pain simply to experience it in its rawness, it can pull you away from where you want to go. What is your pain? It's the experience of not receiving what you most need. It is a place of emptiness where you feel sharply the absence of the love that you most desire. To go back into that place is hard because you're confronted with your wounds as well as your powerlessness to heal yourself. You're so afraid of that place that you think of it as a place of death. Your instinct for survival makes you run away and go looking for something else that can give you a sense of at-homeness, even though you know full well that it can't be found out in the world. You have to begin that your experience of emptiness is not the final experience. That beyond it is a place where you're being held in love. As long as you do not trust that place beyond your emptiness, you cannot safely re-enter the place of your pain. So you have to go into the place of your pain with the knowledge in your heart that you have already found the new place, that you've already tasted some of its fruits. The more roots you have in the new place, the more capable you are of mourning the loss of the old place and letting go of the pain that lies there. You cannot mourn something that has not died. Still, the old pains, attachments, and desires that once meant so much to you need to be buried. You have to weep over your lost pains so that you can gradually leave you, and you can become free to live fully in the new place without melancholy or homesickness. So I read that about 25 years ago, and living that out is not easy. I think being connected is overrated sometimes. It's just really painful. And so there's this sense of the acceptance that I hear in that, even that excerpt, is the willingness to accept my humanity. That I'm fallen, that I'm broken, that I'm not going to be connected all the time, and that's okay. And in fact, the disconnection, if we can look at it differently, is an invitation into awareness, into grace and receiving. Because the fact that we want to protect ourselves isn't a bad thing. It's actually the way that our brain is designed and the way that God designed it. But He also designed us to flip that switch and open back up. But if I didn't have a relationship with Christ, I'm not sure I would open it up at all. Because the reality is I have to trust that the way I was made, the way I was designed, gives me that context to be open and vulnerable in a world that doesn't want you to be, and gives you the distractions. But also that is safety mostly what I really want, or do I really want life? Because I'm designed to live life fully and abundantly, but safety doesn't do that. And I'm not saying don't be safe in certain situations. What I'm saying is I'm not designed to be safe. I'm designed to live abundantly. So if I can't trust that Christ is there when I'm vulnerable, then I'm not going to be open. And so that's why judgment and anger and different things, I think, are spots to be aware of when I'm judging someone and going one up, or if I'm judging myself and going one down. I'm just trying to stay away from receiving. Yeah. And maybe I'm in my judgment, I'm seeing something in myself, or I'm protecting myself. Or maybe when I go one down, there's something that I'm trying to stay away from, or I'm being pulled down into. I just think disconnection most of the time isn't a choice. I think I become aware that I'm disconnected. And it's a painful reality that we live in. It's also a beautiful reality. So we have to make those choices one way or another.
How would you define what disconnection looks like, or to explain?
Well, I think you'd have to go back to the fall. Like, in our humanity, we all get pulled back into this place where we were given choices, and we chose self and safety rather than abundance. And so disconnection has become integrated into who we are as human beings. So I don't think there's a shame in it. I think that there's an invitation out of that. And then when we see Christ in the garden making a choice, when he's in his humanity, he's choosing God's will over his own safety. And that's the part that I'm glad that we have a Savior we can follow that way.
Yeah.
That he, you even look at the people outside the garden, they're falling asleep and dissociated and disconnected because it's just a lot. It's overwhelming. But Christ said he wanted, I don't want this, but I'll choose it because you love me. And he's the one that did it, and now we fall. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yep. Let's go to door number 2.
Door number 2.
Pick a card, any card. And Ben, we got a little bit of a ring happening down here. So if we could maybe just pull the gain down a tiny bit, that'd be great. Okay, number 2. What do you know? You're picking these in the right order. Evil loves the opportunity to disconnect you from relationship and hope. You kind of addressed this a little bit, but again, like, what do you see as what that disconnection actually looks like in us when a client comes to you? Like, how does that present? Like, what does disconnection actually flesh out like?
I guess I first want to say about evil loves the opportunity. Sorry, I'm going to do a fly fishing thing, but like when I'm looking at fish, they're not actually where they are. It's diffracted. So when I'm looking at something, let's say I'm looking at myself, evil diffracts. So it makes it look like something else, but it's not that. And so I think that there are a lot of things where you have to go after evil, and you have to hedge, and you have to, and I don't mind that stuff, but when people come into my office, I look at them the way they could be without the incapacitations and without the lack of access that they currently have. You obviously have to treat people where they are, but I always look at the possibility in mind when I'm working with someone, which is the way I think God sees us. So if evil can get you to disconnect, it can trick you into believing that there isn't a relationship to hold it. And so sometimes I'm just offering myself in a certain way to maybe represent that, not be that, but represent that, or be a conduit to that. So when people come in, they are ashamed and they're overwhelmed, they're in pain. So what do they need? Well, they actually need Christ, and they need that. He's the counselor and the comforter. He can bring relief. I think my job is to help people see that there is a connection. They're not the diffracted thing that they see.
Yeah.
And I think evil does enjoy it. It's trying to kill us. So I don't think we need to take ourselves so seriously. I think we're playing with house money when it comes to Jesus. Is that I think evil gets too much of our focus. I feel like Christ and what he's done and the abundance of that is, if we can get access to that, is the path that is easier to take, harder, but simpler.
Yeah.
I think evil just takes good things and twists it. And so I don't like trying to unravel things like that.
Yeah.
I think God can unravel whatever he likes, but the playing in the face of evil and living in such a way, even beyond how we feel and what we think about ourselves. And I also think about Romans, where it talks about the reality is made clear by who I am. And if you move away from that, all of these sensual things will take you away. Like you'll get lost in your feeling, you'll get lost in sexuality, you'll get lost in your own self. So when Jesus is saying he's the way, the truth, and the life, when he's divine, when he's offering us abundance, he's not screwing around. Like he's like, I didn't just come here to help you survive. Like I came to give you something different. So I think hope is scary, and it'll feel like it'll kill you. And maybe it will in some ways. Maybe there's a death that we need to go through internally to follow someone who died and then was resurrected. Like, I think that's the path he's asking.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
I love that concept of the diffraction and how it looks like something that it's not. Because I think even as we've talked about my own struggles with anxiety, so often the anxiety spins up and gets me all consumed with something that is not really even a real reality, and so.
But it feels real.
But it feels very real, and so pulling back to Christ and connection, and I mean, you've told me many times, press into relationship as the way out of that diffraction.
Yeah, I mean, even getting married to Christy and being around her family and having my kids, like, the more that you move into a relationship, the better. It doesn't clean everything up.
Yeah.
And I don't really care if I'm disconnected much anymore because I'm aware of it and I want to move back toward it. I think that's just the way it is. Like, I'm going to be disconnected. So what? Who cares? And evil shames you in that. Like, see you're failing. See you need to be better.
Yeah.
See if you just read and prayed and did this. I just think, so what? Who cares? Like, I'm disconnected. How do I move back? And every time I move back, I'm just received. I'm received before I move back, but I become aware of being received again and again.
Yeah, that's a good word, because the acceptance of disconnection, as opposed to fighting it and trying to be connected. Like, I go to the fight all the time. Like, I've got to connect. I've got to, and I love that, because that feels much more freeing and simple, to be receiving the fact that I'm already accepted, even in the face of my disconnection. And then that acceptance actually leads me toward connection.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, the last 7-8 years have been painful. And so there's a sense of like, that's the time where I want to disconnect and have, But there's nothing there, actually, for me. I just feel isolated, alone, ashamed, one down, or angry and one up and, judgmental. And it's in flux. Like, some days I'm better at it, some days I'm not. I just think that's our humanity. Who cares? Like, how do we get back to just being accepted, loved?
I love that.
The disconnection that you're talking about internally, if there's something that feels broken in me, or if I've experienced a lot of brokenness or trauma, which I have, and so has everybody else in here, there's a disconnection internally. And so when we're disconnected, we get into a familiar place of safety. And I'm not going to yell at a young child for wanting to connect, like disconnect. So I have to remember that as I'm an adult, but there are parts of me that are not yet home. And so sometimes the disconnection or the lack of feeling like something's there, the hopelessness exists within me. And so as I move back towards connection, that is a really vulnerable place, actually. And so that needs to be held by community, family, people who love you, someone who can help you with it, that kind of thing.
Yes. We've got continuation of this conversation in one of these cards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Which one shouldn't I choose?
You choose. Hey, you picked the right one. Crazy, isn't it?
This is all. Everybody's picking up on it, right?
All of them are on all the cards. I'm just telling you. So, creativity and openness are the first things to go with disconnection. Anything further to add to that? That's kind of an extension of where you were just talking.
Creativity and openness gets us into the other side of our brain that isn't protective. And so kids are really good at this. They just play when they're hurting. And adults get serious. So if you can use creativity, it opens a different thing of possibility, and it's a reflection of God's character anyway. It's a kind way to deal with disconnection.
That's why we're playing a game this morning.
That's why we're playing a game.
It's fun.
It makes it easier for everybody.
Is this easier, Bill?
Yeah. But it's good to have that because you're taking something from the inside and meeting rather than waiting for something from the outside to meet you.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy how that works in conjunction. Like, it's already there. But if you have that disconnection inside and creativity, you can pull it together in a way that's really kind. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. How about this one?
That one's good.
All right. So this is actually something you alluded to already this morning a little bit, because you tend to go out of sequence, and I have a very specific order of things.
That's why we're good friends.
So that's why it works. So here's what you said. You said, I don't want to suffer because part of me does not believe there's a relationship there to suffer with.
You want to speak to that first?
I just find that really deep of that part of the reason suffering is so difficult is because I think I'm alone in it. Is that what you were trying to say, or?
Yeah, to me, it might be deep, but it's accessible. Like, it's just our state of being. We really don't want to suffer. And if we can accept that and what we do to not suffer, I think then we can be kinder. But I think this is where we talked about like the trapeze. Is that right? When I'm suffering, I'm like on this trapeze that goes like this, and there's no net. And I just don't feel like someone's going to be there or whatever. And I know all the things in my head, but the feeling is very different.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've thought about is that with Christ, there's this thing that goes like this, or through other people, or whatever. But you shouldn't suffer if you don't have another thing to grab onto. Like, if all you do is swing here and you just live in that suffering, you're not probably actually changing or healing. You're just suffering. And if you're doing that alone with no net, it feels terrifying. So that's why the disconnection's there. But I think if I can begin to meet other people at that point, then there's a spot where I have something to grab onto before I let go. And I don't think you should ask people to suffer deeply if they don't have something else to connect to.
Which is kind of what Noun was saying there.
Because I've done that part and it sucks. But to be met, like, our suffering isn't going to be fixed. It's just we need to not suffer it alone. Because we all know that we can't fix each other's stuff. But if you're not doing it alone, and it's livable.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a net, by the way.
Yes, and that's what you alluded to that with Christ being our source of connection, and you talked a little bit earlier about the going back to the garden and the two gardens, the choice that Adam and Eve made, and then the choice that Jesus made in his own garden being different. And that's our final quote from you on here, actually, that Jesus chooses the door we can't. He's already ahead of us, asking us to follow, knowing we'll fall asleep. I just love that thought of him inviting his disciples to be there with him, knowing full well that they couldn't do what he was asking them to do, and he still invites them and does it for them.
Yeah, there's a cool thing on the Bible Project. It's called The Test. It's just a little video, but they do a really good, juxtaposition, and obviously the animation's really good, whatever.
Yeah.
I'd like to think myself, if Jesus asked me to go with him, in that moment, that I would be up and praying and, be really like a support there. But I also know myself, like I can be overwhelmed and I can feel sad and depressed or just want to disconnect or numb out or whatever. So I feel like watching him with that juxtaposition where he's really making the step and we're falling asleep, it's actually kind of a cool invitation. Like he knows we will already. He already invited them knowing they would fall asleep.
Right.
And I think they came in thinking that they were going to support him.
Right.
And he's like, I know you won't. Right. And then after I go to the cross, I know you'll scatter. Yeah. Right. But he was never ashamed of us in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and even, thinking about that garden being right before the cross, and that's where he prays his prayer for all of them. Mm-hmm. He had the presence to be fully there in the midst of their incapacity, still doing it for them, which, I think that's really profound.
I feel like we can open it up if anybody wants to.
Yeah, that was where we were going next.
I'm way ahead of you.
Yeah, you're way ahead of me. Yeah. So any questions for Bill as
Or
you're listening? Yeah, Pat.
Well, I was just thinking about suffering. And I think too many of us, especially as older people, were brought up with, if you just believed in God, then it would be like a magic wand, and we live happily ever after, and life doesn't go that way, and you can become awfully hurt, bitter, angry, sorrowful, very grieving, your whole, with me, too much of my life, because I had this perception. We have not had this reality of there is suffering, believing in God or not. Who would you rather suffer with? But if you don't know He's with you, and you're suffering because you're a worm, you're a rat, you're disgusting, you're sinful, you don't flourish, and you can't help others flourish either. And the most people that are suffering are those that are closest with you, your family. And it just perpetuates it.
Thank you for that, Pat.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, I like when he talks about there's a suffering that leads only to sorrow, but and death, and then there's suffering that leads to life. And I think a lot of people were taught, like, the suffering, the kind that just leads to death, really. And a suffering that leads to like emaciation and like nothingness rather than abundance. And what Christ was showing is like there's a suffering, but that ultimately, this is going to be painful, but here's what's going to balance that out. And that's why I think a lot of people, when they initially come in, they feel just like you said, like I've been suffering forever and I'm tired of feeling in pain. I just want relief. I want comfort. And what they're actually doing is regurgitating a pain and eating it again over and over and over. And it doesn't qualitatively change. And so it's super hard to believe that like hope within ourselves can exist in that cycle. But I think Christ is there to help us realize that it's not just suffering, it's relationship with me that makes that even bearable. If that's what you're saying, I think that's brilliant.
Well, you've used the phrase a lot of times of being met in our suffering, and I think is a better goal than relief sometimes is, because what I want is the relief, but being met by Christ in it is better.
Maybe even just a little more on what you said, like what if suffering isn't just about the suffering itself? Like the reality is we're going to be comforted in the midst of that. We're also going to be deeply enjoyed, and I think that's the thing we have the hardest time believing, is that if we're a rat or a worm, the suffering, just get me through it, but we're not expecting to be received or really valued or loved or met well, right? So I think that's where God meets us most profoundly, is where we're running from, in those places.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Katie?
You came in fast today.
I'm rolling.
You were booking.
I've been suffering a little bit lately. I had a foot surgery for this, and we were like, what happened? I didn't break anything. But talk about suffering, like you take something away, your ability to walk. I am like utterly dependent on this guy. And it's such a humbling experience to be, like you take something away. I know this, I'm not trying to oversimplify people's suffering by any means. I'm just speaking to like what God's showing me in this time. But just the humility of like, when you talk about how painful it is to receive, we had a whole conversation on the way here to church about it. It's really difficult to receive, like the whole thing about which shirt I wanted to wear this morning. Because I spilled and then I needed a new shirt and Scott has to go up the stairs again for like the millionth time. And I describe what I want. He brings down two options, and because he's just trying to, make sure he's covered his bases, and I'm all upset. But the thing is not the thing, and I'm not really upset about the shirt. It's just really difficult to receive help over and over and over. And I think about, the receiving of Christ's love, like there's nothing better than that, and how just in this simple season, which will be over in a month for me, so to speak, with regards to this, like how difficult it is, but like every day we have to face just receiving Christ's love, forgiveness, abundance. It's like when you said it's so simple, it is, but it's also really hard. So I just have been deep in thought about those things. Not really a question, just a comment.
Yeah, that the chronic need to receive. Like, I think I want to receive from Christ and then be filled up and be done, and then be, output, giving, whatever, rather than going, that helping, or the need for help doesn't leave, and to stay in a receiving space
feels so awful sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you deny your start, and sometimes I deny what I need. Like, I'm like, I really need water. I don't really want to ask for it again because I just ask God to get other things. So then I just go thirsty.
Yeah.
And yet, He loves me. He'll totally give me water. How much more does God love us?
Well, that's a really good point, because needs and wants are what we get rid of to remain safe. So, like when we're growing up or developmentally, like needs and wants tend to go into a needless wantless or over-dependent state so that we don't have to stay present for what they ask us to do, like the vulnerability. But when I go needless wantless, then I deny the fact that I'm a big bundle of needs and wants. And God understands that about us and wants to meet those. And I think, like C.S. Lewis would say, like one of the most painful things, what's the most profound thing about Christianity? And most people like grace. Like it's daily learning how to receive that. And I'd far much more operate on my own and just ask for when I need things here and there.
Yeah.
But I think he's asking for a dependence that I think just takes a lifetime to develop. So it shows up in mundane things, like asking for water or a shirt.
Yeah.
That's where it's revealed what we really believe about our needs and wants. So that's just another place to be aware of, like, if I just get rid of this, I'll stay safer. The fact is that we're created with that desire innately. You can't get rid of it. So you can turn it down or choke it or, try and suffocate it, whatever you want to do, but it doesn't go anywhere. And it doesn't fundamentally ever change. So it's just accepting that of course we do that. We dial down the desire because we believe what we want or what we needed caused the pain that we experience.
Right.
So when we unhook that, we just realize that it's just painful to not get what we want and need.
Yeah.
And God is a perfect, though excruciating place to try that out, because he's going to meet it every time, and he's going to meet it more than what we actually ask for and need and want. Far more than you can ask or imagine, that kind of thing.
Aren't we glad for people who give us the pictures in our life of what grace actually looks like? So thank you, Scott, for looking like Jesus.
Oh boy.
Maybe one more here, Ron.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I like to focus on God's help, because I had a huge awakening in my walk with Christ, getting closer and closer. I'm more dependent on Him with my suffering, because I realized I came from a cult. Well, you can't explain that to anyone. So you really don't. I don't think it's possible to know a human being completely. But God, I realized He knew every step of the way. He had His hand on my shoulder. So as far as recovering from past trauma and all that kind of stuff, it's been a blessing to have God knowing this whole thing, when no one else can really understand.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you.
This is probably a whole nother time for this.
We'll do it.
Think about it. On the opposite side, the one hurting, how do you help without hurting that person? How much, where do you put offering? Where do you, when you don't see where the bottom is, and it looks like the bottom just keeps getting deeper. And you love that person. What do you do?
Yeah, I think a couple things that come to mind. After working with people for so long, you have to have a limit to yourself. And Jesus was a great example of this in terms of, okay, well, we're leaving now. Well, there's so many people who are suffering. He's like, I know, we gotta move. And I don't think he was just abandoning them. What I thought was that, it's probably going to be met somewhere else. But one of the things that helped me is that I'm not healing or fixing anyone. And if I come in with the idea that that's what I'm doing, and I've done that before, with my children, with life in general, and you have to own that, I failed to set limit there. And the reason that we can let go of that a lot is that Christ is the one that's going to be doing that. But I think being present with people who are deeply suffering is something that they miss out on quite a bit, because people either want to fix or they want to change. But it takes a tremendous amount of strength to just sit with somebody and feel what they feel. And I think if people who are deeply suffering know that they won't suffer alone, then that's what we can offer. That's enough. Sometimes it may be a little more than that or whatever. But a good indication that we've kind of lost our boundaries, that we're just exhausted when we're around that person and we're resentful. Once you get into resentment, you know that you've broken a boundary, and that's where you have to pay attention to yourself, because it's not about the other person, they're just hurting. When I found myself there, I try to back off, and that's why being able to talk to my wife about that stuff or whatever is really good, because I can just be like, I just am pissed right now at this. Well, I understand that, but I set myself up for that. Like, I've invested too far. And I think that somehow is connected to the idea that we need to be something to that person more than what we can be. So if we limit ourselves, we actually do a service to that person in pain. Sometimes their suffering needs to happen. And so we're there to bear witness to it and to hold them up while they suffer, buoy them, maybe. Because as they go through the suffering, they'll get that opportunity to meet Christ in the midst of that, hopefully. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was a really good question, Beth. And I was thinking about either disconnection with other people that we see in someone else or feel within ourselves to go. Sometimes I think it's remembering our limitations and that we can't be the ones to even fix it in ourselves, let alone in somebody else. I was thinking about the verse that says, He's before all things, and in Him all things hold together. Like, He's got to be the one to do the holding.
Well, because it's so hard.
Yeah.
Because we love people and we think, if I don't love them in a certain way, what might happen, But I also think of that verse where he talks about a bruised reed I won't break, and a smoldering wick I won't put out. My burdens, my yoke is easy, my burden's light. I used to hate that verse. Like, it feels so heavy. But I think and it still is heavy, but I think I was doing too much. And I couldn't see, like, how is this burdenless? And I think that was within me, like, I need to do more. But, codependence and love, there's a razor's edge to that. So when you just find yourself falling, see if you can come back. And when you find yourself pushing away, see if you can just be present. I mean, that's a constant adjustment, I think, I'm making. Hopefully that helps.
Well, thank you for
Love you, dude.
what you do. Thanks for diving in with us. We're coming to the Lord's Supper here this morning, and just as we do in response to just some of these things Bill's shared, I just want to give you a moment to just reflect on the question: what am I needing Jesus to reconnect in me right now? You're getting a hi, Dad, from.
Hey. With that question,
Yeah.
as you pray about that, two things. What if he's already there?
Yeah.
And then what if the disconnection is just the way that the body shows you that there's something that needs attention?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not bad.
Right.
So.
Yes. Even so maybe just even where you're needing to meet him in the disconnection, or see that he's already there. Where are you feeling it, and where would you like to invite him to meet you? So just take a moment in your own heart, and sometimes I think the role of confession, of just telling him where you're feeling inadequate, where you feel you've failed or let him down or fallen asleep. Just to acknowledge it and let it be and offer it to him and invite him in.